Well, let's find out more about how all of this is going down in China. We're joined by Robert Lawrence Q, now expert on Chinese affairs from Beijing. Thanks very much for joining us. So I suppose the question is China now likely to become a significant cash cow for Europe?
Well, don't tell all these people that. They will be very angry. They feel that they and their fellow countrymen worked for 3 decades, very hard, many of them in sweatshops, and for the leaders to squander their money on bad debt would make them very angry. But in all seriousness, China's leaders take what's happening in Europe very seriously for several reasons. First of all, China's economy is very fragile, and the entire world is dependent upon Europe. We see what happens. So China knows that the entire economy of the world depends on Europe, and so China is affected by that. Secondly, China knows that Europe is one of its most important markets, and exports are still a giant part of China's economy. So it's essential. And third, China looks upon the world as a multipolar world. And so a strong Europe is needed to balance out the United States and Russia, and China wants to participate. So for all of these reasons, Europe is exceedingly important to China, and I think that's good for the world.
But are we talking about a huge contribution? What kind of money is going to be put forward by the Chinese?
Well, first of all, China is going to be very circumspect in terms of what it does. It's not going to be investing very quickly in the sovereign debt of any individual country, and it will want to work with other countries in the G20 and particularly in the IMF so that there is an international approach that China will be a participant in, and they will want to send a signal to the world that China will support Europe. China's not going to do this without expecting something in return. That is not necessarily a quid pro quo, because Europe by itself is important to protect, but an appreciation for what China has become. This will mean greater participation in the IMF in terms of voting rights. It will mean recognition of China as a market economy, which has been very controversial, as we know. And it will also mean opening up the European markets to additional Chinese investment and more opportunities. China feels to some degree in some areas that they are excluded, just like we in the West feel that the China market is often unfavorable to foreign companies.
But with those worries and concerns, do the Chinese people have enough of a voice when these kinds of decisions, this kind of help is being given?
Well, you know, the approach today is a very interesting one because the people have a very strong voice. It's not a voting voice. It's not a direct political voice. But there's something about Chinese society today in terms of the internet, in terms of cell phones. There are 900 million cell phones. Nothing happens here without somebody taking a picture and putting it up on websites. And there's great a sense of nationalism and a sense that they don't want their leaders doing things that is going to hurt China and to hurt the hard work that the people have done here. And so they're watching closely.
Robert, we know that Europe's been criticised for, in the past, not having a backup plan, a plan B in times of crisis. Do you think the Chinese have a backup plan? Are they cunning enough to make sure that they come out of all of this in one piece?
You know, it's very difficult. They have several levels of plan. They're very anxious. They'll put in the stimulus package, which they did at the end of 2008. They did that very quickly, faster than any other nation, and as a percentage of GDP, it was the highest in the world because they were very concerned about tens of millions of people being put out of work and then start marching in the streets. So they're very concerned about that. And, you know, at the end of the day, China has a significant internal police and paramilitary force. And to prevent chaos in the country, you know, that would be used because that would be the lesser evil if economic devastation occurs. But nobody expects that. Everybody recognizes there are problems, but that China can become more self-reliant, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to build up domestic consumption in China so they are not dependent so much upon exports and therefore at the mercy of what happens in Europe. So if we fast forward 10 years or so and the Chinese economy becomes more robust from a domestic consumption point of view, China may be less likely to bail out Europe in the future. So this may be the last best chance for Europe to put its house in order with Chinese support.
Robert Lawrence Kuhn, author of the book How China's Leaders Think. Thanks very much for your time.
Pleasure.